fact sheet that mirrors this, everything that I say on this call momentarily. So you will have written record of all of this as well. And I believe that is all the written materials as well. There's also it will be a letter going out to the public later this afternoon. I would say first that President Romer and I are committing today that the state will continue to implement the Common Core state standards and will continue its implementation of the PARCC test. The governor's comments and proclamations notwithstanding, this is a long-term plan that we have been working on for 4 years and have committed to another 10 years of implementation on, and it is not something that we are willing to subject our children to last-minute changes on to throw our system into a state of educational chaos. I want to talk a little bit about the entire plan and how it is unfolded, what that means, and then I will go through a blow-by-blow factual statement of the governor's proclamations. We started this process in 2010 when Bessie adopted the Common Core state standards. At that point, the governor, then Bessie president, and then state superintendent signed a commitment to developing new test forms and new questions for tests that would allow us to be measured in comparison with other states. Now, 4 years later, 45,000 Louisiana kids took these tests over the course of the last several months, and our plan to continuing implementation moves forward. In 2015, the department will deliver the tests and will score the tests using the state's current contract that is active for grade 3 through 8 testing and that have been awarded through the state's procurement process. State law is what mandates that these things happen. And I want to be very clear about that the governor mentioned today how important it is to follow state law. State law is explicit that the plan that I just laid out be carried forward. First, under the Louisiana State Constitution, and I quote, "The state board shall supervise and control the public and elementary and secondary and special schools and shall have budgetary responsibility for all funds appropriated or allocated by the state, all as provided by law." So the Constitution gives Bessie authority to determine the issues that we are covering today subject to the law. The law then says the following: the State Department of Education, with the approval of the State Board of Education, shall develop and establish statewide content standards. Explicitly Bessie's and the State Department's responsibility, not the governor's, to develop content standards. Third, state law mandates that beginning with 2014-2015 school year, standards-based assessments shall be based on nationally recognized content standards. Explicit in state statutes that next year's tests be based on national recognized content standards, and that the standard-based tests at a minimum shall be comparable to national achievement tests, and that the student achievement standards on such tests shall be set with reference to test scores of the same grade levels nationally. These are not Bessie rules. They are not department initiatives. These are in the state's laws. So you have a state-mandated action on a long-term plan with Bessie and the State Department following those actions. Now let's respond then to each point that the governor made. First, the governor said that he would send a letter to the PARCC Consortium terminating the agreement that he had signed in 2010 along with the State Board President and along with the Superintendent at the time, Paul Pasterek. The MOU very clearly states that the people holding each of those three positions would have to sign the letter in order to terminate the agreement. PARCC and its lawyers have verified that. State lawyers have verified that. Thus, the governor's statement to that effect has no effect on whether or not Louisiana will continue to participate in developing the PARCC test questions and test forms. The governor spent the most time today discussing the competitive bid process, and he stated that the PARCC MOU, which is an agreement that was signed in 2010 is in violation of the state law. He issued an executive order to require that there be a request for proposals for a new assessment because, as he said, a legal process is needed. He said that the MOU is in violation of the law. I'm going to walk through multiple facts that show here how the state is proceeding in a legal way and how what the governor said about the law is incorrect. First, the State Department of Education and Bessie are always required to follow state bid laws, irrespective of any MOU they enter into for any service. In fact, the MOU explicitly says this, that the MOU actually, it says, and this is word for word, and you'll get this in the fact sheet, does not constitute a financial commitment on the part of the parties, and that any financial arrangements are subject to ordinary budgetary and administrative procedures. In other words, while the governor said that the MOU tries to skirt the procurement process, the MOU explicitly says to its signers, you have to follow the procurement process. Now, the state already maintains a contract for administering and for scoring grade 3 through 8 tests. That contract went through the state's procurement process. The state of Louisiana will continue to use that contract to provide grade 3 through 8 tests. We will change the test forms and the test questions as we do every year, and we will move forward with our plan in full compliance with state bid law. A new contract is not needed. Furthermore, an executive order of the effect that the governor issued requires some kind of an underlying statute saying that the governor can issue that kind of an executive order in the first place requiring an RFP. No such underlying statute exists. The legislature did, however, take up the question of whether this initiative requires an RFP. In fact, it was debated as part of the House Bill 1 debate. The legislature stripped it out, and when the legislature approved the budget, they did not include a provision requiring an RFP, so the legislature debated that and spoke on it. The fact of it is, an RFP is not needed. We already have a contract in place to provide these services. That contract has gone through the very bid process that the governor described. The MOU requires that we be in compliance with state bid law, and we would have no plans to ever do otherwise. Third, the governor said he was suspending rules passed by Bessie regarding the implementation of new tests. Irrespective of whether the governor can and cannot do that, these rules do not mention PARC, rules do not mention the Common Core. All they do is reinforce language that is already in the statutes, talking about how there have to be standards-based assessments. Whether the governor can or cannot veto these rules has no effect on whether or not the state will implement the Common Core standards and the PARC test, because it is explicitly Bessie's responsibility and not the governor standards and to set assessments. Finally, the governor is sending a letter to the NGA and to the Common Core State Standards or Council of Chief State School Officers Initiative organization, withdrawing Louisiana from the Common Core State Standards Initiative. I refer back to the statutes, which very explicitly indicate that Louisiana, it is Bessie and not the governor that approves Common Core State Standards. I'm going to ask President Romer, and by the way, if you're on the phone and you're not President Romer, if you could mute your line. If you could mute your, you could mute your phone, please. That would be great. I'm going to ask President Romer for his comments, and then I am happy to answer questions. I know President Romer is as well. President Romer, I'll pass it to you.
Sure. I appreciate everyone being on the call. I think John's superintendent's comments were very clear. We think and believe that we're executing, in fact, a plan that law requires us to execute, much to the contrary of the governor's remarks. So from a legal precedent, we are doing exactly what the law requires us to do. And furthermore, those
that y'all have violated the bid law, but y'all haven't even bought Park, right?
Well, Mike, I would say that actually the state operates every year grade 3 through 8 testing. We have a company with which we contracted as a state through the competitive bid process years ago to run that process. Every year they use their technology, they use their scoring system, and they change the test questions every year. They're going to run the grade 3 through 8 testing for us next year per the contract that was entered into through the procurement process in accordance with the laws of the state of Louisiana and approved by the administration of Governor Bobby Jindal.
Yeah, the premise is erroneous, Mike. I mean, we have a vendor that provides this service. They're going to continue to provide the service, and that vendor was chosen through the procurement process.
This is Melinda DeLotte. I guess I'm a little confused. John, you and I talked before, and you said that the park test had never actually been purchased. So I'm unclear under what contract you're saying that y'all are going to keep implementing the park test.
Every year, we change the questions on the test. And sometimes we buy those, or the vendor acquires those questions from other organizations. In the past, for example, some of the LEAP questions have been acquired through a company called the Iowa Test of Basic. In other words, the questions on the grade 3 through 8 test are not always developed by the same company that administers the test through its computer system, that scores the test, and so on. They are the test vendor. It's like building a building. You have a general contractor who is in charge of overseeing the entire project, but a test is made up of multiple pieces.
So are you saying you can buy the park test through a contract with a vendor that you already have on the books?
I'm saying that every year, that vendor that's contracted on a multi-year basis delivers a test that is made up of different questions from one year to the next, and they acquire those questions from a variety of sources. This year, they'll be acquiring the park questions. That is how we are implementing a plan that we've committed to implementing for 4 years.
But so you're saying you don't have to buy the test directly yourself, that you can use this third-party vendor to buy the questions from Park, essentially. Is that right? Am I summing that up correctly?
I'm saying that administering the park test does not actually require a new contract in spite of what the governor said today.
This is Fab Simmerman at Channel 31 in Alexandria, Louisiana. Aren't we then looking at a lawsuit between you all and the fourth floor at some point?
You'd have to ask them. I mean, we're planning on going ahead and implementing the plan that's in accordance with state law, and we've been implementing for 4 years. I mean, what we're doing is no secret. I mean, they made an announcement today. We made an announcement 4 years ago.
But what I'm saying is, even if I ask them and they ask me to ask you, I mean, is this not now another education legal conundrum that is going to take somebody into court?
I don't really know. All I know is that we're implementing the laws.
Okay.
As required by the legislature. The procurement laws, the education laws, and the Constitution.
You know, I don't think anybody has the authority to ignore the Constitution of the state. And this whole process has clearly gone through our entire legislative and BESI process that the Constitution mandates. So the comments from the governor just aren't accurate. And he doesn't have the authority that he's articulating that he has.
John Chaz, this is John Walton, KTV in West Monroe. What do you think, and I'll just ask the question, what do you think is the governor's underlying reason to want to pull the state out Common Core standards?
Well, I mean, he's made several comments that has articulated his reasons. I don't agree with his commentary. He even wrote an editorial that admitted that this wasn't a federal program, and he wrote an editorial that said that. And yet he's come back to that as the basis moment of today for saying that we ought to pull out. I've made it clear, unfortunately, and I don't take any great satisfaction in saying this. This is a political maneuver because of politics, his politics, that are national in scope and are focused on a very particular portion of the vote in this country. And that's what this is doing. There's no other way to explain a 180-degree turn from a plan that started in January of 2010 and has been debated for years and debated again in the legislature this session.
Hey, John, this is Will Sintel. Can you hear me?
Yes.
The governor says he has confidence in you, even though this is a fundamental disagreement that you and him have about Common Core and the test. You have said, among other things, that the governor is wrong on the law on this. Can this continue where, and I know you're hired by Bessie, but can this continue where the governor of the state and the state superintendent of education are telling people in the state totally different stories about the way to go on Common Core?
I think there's probably a lot of people who have different interpretations of the law. Our interpretation in this case happens to be the correct one, but that's not to say there can't be other interpretations. And when you look at the choices we provided to families, the increased outcomes we've provided, this department working together with the State Board of Education, working together with the governor's office, have accomplished extraordinary things alongside the students and teachers of Louisiana. I take great pride in that, and I take great pride in any affiliation with the governor. We just happen to have a different interpretation of the law on this issue.
No, and I would say we've made a tremendous amount of progress in this state on a number of issues that are critical, and we happen to disagree on this one. I just simply have a disagreement with the tactic in this particular instance. I don't mind a healthy, upfront debate about issues. I do take exception to maneuvers that circumvent the democratic process, and which in this case, I think people would be remiss if they didn't talk about how thorough a process this has been in the debate in this state. It's been very thorough.
John, one other thing. In light of all of this happening with school 6 weeks away or however long it is, what is the impact of all of this, and particularly the events today, on classrooms for the 2014-15 school year? Is this something where this can be ironed out, test given, and things are relatively harmonious? Is it something that's going to shadow the school year, or what?
I think there's two sides of this question. From a substance perspective, because our plan is the legal plan that has the Constitution and the laws alongside it, we're going to continue on the same plan we've been communicating with teachers about for years. On the other hand, having been a teacher, I can tell you that it doesn't feel good to have even the potential of a change looming over you. You care about your kids and you want them to feel successful. The idea that we change the rules of the game in the 7th inning doesn't feel good if you're a teacher. But on the other hand, I hope they take some satisfaction in the fact that the plan that's been committed to is the legal plan, and it will be executed.
Well, and let me add this. I don't want this unhealthy back and forth to continue. The laws don't support his position. The laws support our position. He's made it clear he doesn't agree with the policy at this point. But that's contrary to what the legislature has said and what Bessie has said. And the Constitution gives us the authority to make that decision. So, I'd be glad for the governor and I to stand up and say we simply disagree on this. And he'll get the credit that he wants nationally, that he doesn't agree with this. But our state needs to move forward with the plan that we've outlined, because it's in the best interest of the students of this state. That doesn't necessarily mean his politics, but it's in the best interest of the students of this state.
So just to be clear, I mean, what y'all are going to tell teachers and school principals is just stay the course. These are the tests we're using. These are the standards we're using. Ignore what the governor is saying?
Well, I would never ask anyone to ignore the governor. I would simply say that we commit to you that the plan that we have committed plan that we will continue to implement. We commit to you that we will provide clarity, will not support last-minute switches, and we commit to you we'll do the best thing for the kids, and that's what we're doing.
Chaz, how do you think the governor will respond to what you two have just said?
I don't know. If I don't want to really truly speculate. I've always welcomed any conversation I've had with the governor. I've not had one in the past 6 to 8 months regarding this issue. I really believe at this point he's made his point that he doesn't agree. We've made our point that we don't agree either, but that the law is on our side, and the policies that have been debated in this state are on our side. And at this moment, I think everyone needs to be focused on the future of our state and outcomes for our students. And those may not be consistent with the governor's politics, and it may not be consistent with if he had fiat power. If he had ultimate power, it may not be what he chooses to do. He's made that clear. But unfortunately, we live in a democratic society. It doesn't work that way. And so at this moment, I would expect him to say, let's push forward. It's time to move forward and move past this debate.
Okay, thank you.
John, this is Lindsay Layton from the Washington Post, and I'm wondering whether you sent any communication to Park, or have you? The governor mentioned that he sent letters to the NGA and the chief state school officers. Have you sent anything else saying, this is your position and Louisiana remains a part of Park?
Yeah, in January 2012, I sent as per the Park MOU, I sent a recommitment of when I took this job of the state's involvement in that initiative, and I have not hedged on that commitment. Thus, our commitment.
But do you need to let them know that what your position is now in light of what the governor has communicated to them?
I don't think it's any secret what my position is. And the position of the board for whom I work, and the position of the legislature under whose laws I serve.
Superintendent White,
and Lindsay, I want to be very clear about that. This is not a John White and Chaz Romer show.
Mm-hmm.
This is what the elected bodies of our state and the constitutionally appointed bodies of our state not only have permitted, but quite literally have mandated. This is not, for those of you covering from outside of Louisiana, this is not a situation like we had in Oklahoma. This is a situation where the elected bodies of the state have affirmed and commanded that this be the path. So the superintendent or the board president are acting not alone, but they are acting alongside the constitutionally established bodies that oversee these questions in our state. So I'm a member of Park, not just as a function of an MOU signed by 3 men, but by function of a plan committed to by the elected body representing the people of our state. And that was a plan committed to 4 years ago and reaffirmed in the law 2 years ago. This announcement today comes in the bottom of the 9th inning.
Thank you. One other quick question. The governor, in his remarks, kept referring to federal overreach and how the state realizes, or he realizes today, that the role of the federal government wasn't completely revealed when the MOU was signed, and that this is federal overreach. Could either of you or both of you please respond to that?
Well, I would point to his own editorial he wrote that appeared in a newspaper, a national newspaper, some month and a half ago, when he said it wasn't a federal program. He admitted that, but said there are other reasons why he objects, and that it's because of this belief that has been created by some political groups, he now can't support it. He admitted in his own letter to that fact. I'm not making that up. And I want to reiterate what Superintendent White said. I speak on behalf of the constitutionally
If I didn't believe that these standards were the best standards for our children to aspire toward, I would recommend to the State Board of Education and the state legislature that we change them immediately, and would experience no repercussion, and am willing to risk any repercussion from the federal government. Speak for our board and our department, and the legislators have supported this notion as well, that we're doing what is right for our kids, not because someone outside of our borders thought it was a good idea.
Thanks.
Superintendent White, this is Matoko Rich from the New York Times. How committed do you think the teachers of the state are? Do you think this sort of state of confusion will in fact put the students into chaos come fall?
I think that there is a risk that in the minds of some, when you have a powerful voice like the governor's articulating that he wants to go in a different direction, that some teachers will be concerned or even scared. All that I can do, and that those of us who are at the state level can do, is to assure them that they are not only within the bounds of the law, but they are within the bounds of decency and doing what's right for our kids, and that will be upheld by anyone who looks reasonably at the plan that we have and at the laws of our state. So I think all we can do is assure them that this is the right path and the legal path, and things will work out.
Thank you.
You should receive a press release from us that went out 15 or 20 minutes ago describing much of what President Romer and I have said. You'll also receive a fact sheet that will speak point by point to some of the things the governor said. All I would say, again, this is a long-term plan. It abides by the law, and it follows the law's mandates in our state. It is being implemented within those bounds, and we will be seeing it through next year and in the decade to come. I thank you all very much for joining, and if you'd like to follow up, please follow up with our press office. We're happy to speak with you individually. Thanks so much.
Thank you all.
Thank you.